Today, we are going to uncork a basic component of wine. Well, the cork. Or rather, we are going to look at the different ways a wine bottle can be sealed up. And what does that mean for the beverage inside? Hey there, I'm Jacqueline for Vero, where we go around the world searching out wild and scarce, hard to find small production wines to introduce to the US for wine lovers, businesses, and distributors across the country to discover and enjoy along with us. And we know the type of closure of a wine can signal a lot of things, from how long we can age it and so much more. So it's time we learned a bit more about wine closures, because you see, I'm secretly a closure geek and love to learn all about the different ways that I can stop up a bottle of wine. Today we are going to have a look at 5 different closures. We're going to look at natural corks, synthetic corks, plant-based corks, and screw caps. They all have their pros and cons, which we are going to go over briefly here. But if you want a more in-depth discussion, I highly suggest you check out the accompanying blog article linked in the description below. If you haven't read that article yet, it might be you're not yet subscribed to the Vero newsletter, because we send out email notifications whenever we release new articles, content, and of course, wines. So be sure to subscribe to the Vero newsletter on verovino.com that I will have linked below to also stay up to date with Vero. So closure number 1, certainly the most famous, timeless, and recognizable closure, is that of the natural cork. We have actually done a whole video on natural cork and how it's farmed in previous video, so I will link that after for you to check out. But let's look at the basics of the natural cork. So this has been the closure of choice for centuries, and they are prized for their ability to allow a minuscule amount of oxygen to transfer into the bottle. This gradual exposure to oxygen is crucial for the complex development of aromas and flavors in wines that is meant to happen during long-term aging. And as well, the tradition and ritual of uncorking a bottle is just part of the wine drinking experience at this point, right? However, natural corks do come with a downside: their variability and the risk of cork taint. As we talked about in our previous video, these are actually stamped and cut from the actual cork bark, which means as a natural product, there can be slight variations and differences from cork to cork to cork, which can of course translate to a small variability in the wine. As well, they are susceptible to cork taint. Cork taint is caused by a chemical compound called TCA, which imparts unpleasant, musty, wet cardboard or damp newspaper odors and flavors into the wine. When this happens, we call it corked, and it is usually considered undrinkable. This inconsistency can be a major challenge for winemakers and a disappointment for consumers, which is why other alternatives to the traditional cork and natural cork has cropped up. One such alternative is the amalgamated cork. One of the most famous companies that makes these are the DM corks. These corks are made from small, purified pieces of natural cork that undergo a rigorous process of extracting and removing any potential TCA compounds. These purified granules are then bound together with food-safe glues to form the homogeneous cork stopper. This leaves us with a cork that still gives the feel and tradition of an all-natural cork, but it minimizes the risk of cork taint. Most DMs come certified for different lengths of time, meaning that they will sort of reimburse the producer for faulty corks in 2 or 5, 10 years, for example. This one here I have is actually a DM2, so this is for 2 years. These different numbers give us also an idea of the density of the cork, where the amalgamation is more or less dense. Some critics will turn their noses up at the idea of the glue that holds these together, but as long as you go with a reputable company like DM's, they are highly tested to not have any ill effects on the wine, even during long-term aging. So plant-based corks are just that. They are not natural corks made from the cork bark, but rather they are stoppers that are made from other types of plant-based materials. The most common material for these is actually sugarcane. These closures are designed to offer a similar satisfying pop to traditional or amalgamated corks, but since no cork material at all is present, TCA is a non-issue. While some micro-oxidation can occur through these closures, they are generally not porous enough to allow for a lot of wine evolution, making them best suited for young drinking wines. Our next closure are synthetic material corks, and they're an interesting choice. They are made from food-safe plastics and polymers. They can be TCA-free, but unlike natural cork or even the plant-based cork, they are usually not biodegradable or natural. Furthermore, Furthermore, particularly with the cheaper versions, there's a possibility that the plastics might interact with the wine over time, leading to undesired flavors. And now we come to one of the more infamous wine closures, the screw cap. Let's tackle this big myth head on. The idea that screw cap wines are only for cheap or low quality wines is just not true. In fact, it couldn't be further from the truth. This myth stems from the screw cap's early adoption by wineries that produced cheap and lower quality wines. But the reality is, nowadays, the modern screw cap technology has actually evolved dramatically, and they are now used in high quality wines and are even being used in age-worthy wines worldwide. So, why should wine lovers consider screw caps a friend and not a foe? Well, the first and obvious is that there is no cork taint. Another fairly obvious reason is that they are super easy to open and close and accessible as well. No fancy tools or corkscrews are needed. Just grab and twist. But these screw caps actually can allow for a lot of consistency in wine. Good screw caps will offer a consistent seal for the wine, which means there will be more reliable aging conditions from bottle to bottle. Unlike a natural cork, that the single pieces may be more dense or less dense than others. As well, there are new technologies that even allow for controlled levels of oxygen transfer and micro-oxidation, meaning that wines can now be aged beautifully while still under a screw cap. So while we are fans of the ease and the consistency of screw caps, and we know that it's not necessarily a sign of quality any longer, we will be the first to admit that screw caps do indeed lack that traditional ceremony of a cork. There's something about pulling it out with a corkscrew that just is wonderful for wine lovers. But still, we feel that a screw cap's technical advantages are undeniable, and it proves that quality doesn't have to be dictated by the closure type necessarily. Now, 2 quick bonus corks for sparkling wines. When it comes to sparkling wines, the closure takes an even more critical role due to the immense pressure that is built up inside the bottle. The most iconic stopper for many sparkling wines is the so-called mushroom cork. These are called this for the shape and not necessarily the material. These corks are usually made from agglomerated pieces, and they get their distinctive shape because when they are put into the bottle, they are actually completely cylindrical. But thanks to the super high pressure, they sort of stick in this shape when we pop them out. To prevent premature popping, they will be held securely in place by a wire cage. Some sparkling wines, I don't have one here today with me, but especially pet nats, are closed with crown caps. These are essentially like a beer cap with a fluted edge that is crimped securely around the bottle's upper lip. Like a screw cap, they provide an airtight seal with no oxygen transfer and are incredibly secure. Interestingly, crown caps are also used in the initial stages of traditional method sparkling wines like champagne, before the wine is disgorged and this traditional cork is inserted. But for pet nats made in the ancestral method, since they are re-fermented in the bottle but not disgorged like champagne, it makes perfect sense that they would retain that crown cap. Now, a big challenge with sparkling wine is keeping the bubbles, as they tend to disappear once the bottle is opened. Because whether initially closed with a mushroom cork or a crown cap, you can't really reinsert the cork or close it back up after its opening. But there is another solution. We actually love to use these WAF patented sparkling wine stoppers. They keep the bubbles lasting for days. So basically, you just insert this part into the bottle, crimp this down like that, and your bottles are now safe. And of course, here at Vero, I'm sure you have picked up that we love and we push for experimentation. So go and try wines that have different closures. See if you agree with us on the pros and the cons. You can find a list in the accompanying article linked below of wines that are sealed with various closures. Or you can head to the Vero shop to purchase some awesome wines with all sorts of closures, from screw caps to natural cork. As well, you can get this nifty WAF closure too. So, thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like below and remember to subscribe to the Vero newsletter on verovino.com and here on YouTube to not miss any Vero news. I am going to leave you with this aforementioned video on cork trees and farming. I'm going to go geek out more on wine closures. See you later. Bye.